Welcome to the LA Business Podcast, your destination to hear stories of how businesses grow and scale. I'm Robert Brill, CEO of Brill Media and the host of this podcast. Now, let's jump right into this week's interview. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the LA Business Podcast. Today our guest is Michelle Lewis, a visibility and publicity expert who helps entrepreneurs skyrocket their visibility, launch their unique show strategy, and start landing press for their brand with Hollywood techniques found in the Visibility Lounge. Thanks for being with us today, Michelle.
Absolutely, Robert. I'm excited to be here. And I love your podcast logo. That was great. I was like, oh, I recognize all these places. It's fantastic.
So you recently moved to Idaho from Los Angeles.
I did.
So tell us a little bit about Visibility Vixen. You started this in 2016. Tell us a little bit about what brought you to the point where you wanted to start this business.
Absolutely. It was absolutely not planned out of the blue. I actually was working in TV and film, and I'd spent a lot of time on this pilot. We actually shot a pitch project. We had pitched it to a bunch of different networks. And when I got a notification that a studio had taken our concept, our name, and just tweaked a couple of things, that's when I decided I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And when I started my business online, having no idea what I was doing.
Oof, that's tough. Hollywood is, I mean, I live in LA and you are in LA, and it's I try very hard to stay away from just the core creativity of Hollywood. It just seems so dog eat dog. And there's such a big opportunity to have exactly what happened to you happen across many different places. So tell us about Visibility Vixen. What do you do with Visibility Vixen?
So it's morphed over the years, but what I found was really interesting about my unique knowledge was color psychology. And I'd learned a lot about it, well, a little in film school. I'd observed a lot of film sets with some of the biggest Hollywood movies and how they integrated it in production design. And then I actually studied natural medicine for a while. So I had like all of these pieces about color. And I decided when my first launch of my brand failed miserably to go back to the drawing board and figure out, back then it was called like Ladypreneur Legacy or something. Found the name Visibility Vixen, integrated that color psychology knowledge, and found that I was getting attention, including media attention, very easily versus what I was doing before. So that became one of the staples of my brand, teaching people how to inject color psychology in their brand, which then developed into visibility and ultimately publicity strategies.
So tell us about color psychology. I mean, knowing what we were talking about and seeing your site with the different types of colors on the site, it made sense to me that color is a very important part of your business. But why is that important? Why should entrepreneurs be thinking about this?
Sure. So, what you're usually taught and what you naturally have your proclivity for when you're starting your business is what color you think is going to resonate the most, what your favorite color is, what you think looks good. That's what we're taught. You go to Pinterest, you put together your board of what you think your feel should be like. And the problem is there's a huge disconnect with your audience and ultimately your customer. You probably know the book Building a Story Brand that's written by Donald Miller, and he talks about how your customer is the hero of the story. And it's a similar concept here. So finding that color that subconsciously attracts your ideal client based on where they want to go is one of the biggest keys that I found, not only for my brand, but the hundreds of entrepreneurs I've worked with.
So is it about the colors you put in on your website and in your ads, or is it more than that?
Ultimately, it's your presence online. Color you wear on the interview, doing it right now,
Mhm.
what you have your brand photos in, the colors on your site, how you carry them through your funnel, your social media presence, what visibility vehicle you're doing, podcast, blog, live streaming show, all those things can make a big impact to attract traffic to turn them into a subscriber and a customer.
And tell us about the types of businesses you work with, and like what give us some real world examples of how you've helped clients with your visibility and color schematics here.
Absolutely. So I've worked with people all the way from real estate investors to people that run a business out of their RV to people who are Facebook ads specialists and all across the field. Someone that comes to mind is my friend Tamar, who is a member of the Visibility Lounge program. She came with a passion, wanted to teach her program and courses and help women invest in real estate. So we came up with her trademark name, which is Wealth Warrior Woman, and she branded in green as it symbolized a lot of wealth and growth subconsciously to her audience, and helped her book pretty much all of the top podcasts in real estate, and has really helped her grow her brand.
And what does, one of the colors on our site are our two primary colors are blue, a midnight blue, and kind of a light orange. Actually, the
Mhm.
colors that you see on the screen right now are our
Yeah.
primary colors. What does I just picked those because I like them. Have
Mhm.
no knowledge about color psychology whatsoever. Tell us about what that says to prospective clients.
Absolutely. I think that it varies depending on what your intention is, but from what I see of your brand, blue is very much a calming color. It's a color of trust. It symbolizes intellect. It resonates in our heart and lungs area in our body. There have been studies done where if someone looks at the color blue, their blood pressure actually decreases, their heart rate slows down, everything starts calming down. So it's definitely a color of trust and motivation. Orange is a little bit different. It tends to resonate in our bodies in more of the pancreas area, and it symbolizes balance
Mm.
mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. So, this is a really great color for someone to use to say, hey, I'm going to help you balance this aspect of your life. Does that make sense?
It does. That's really interesting. I like orange because it seems to me it's very the work that we do is in some ways it's like on it's not the bleeding edge of advertising, but it in a lot of ways there's a lot of change over the last decade in the world of advertising,
Yeah.
and I wanted that orange to stand out that we're basically doing something that's very unique relative to the types of clients that we take on. And I just like blue because I like the dark blue because it's very understated. I like understated things generally. Um, so fascinating. So tell us a little bit about the 90-day visibility sprints, that building your audience and customers with visibility vehicles.
Absolutely. A lot of people, they launch their business, they put it out online, and then they sit there waiting for the customers to come. It can feel frustrating. And if your ultimate goal is to be able to get features, get publicity, and of course, customers, we have to start building that online presence. And some people go, okay, well, I'm just going to post on Instagram. But the problem with that is that you don't have the SEO going back to your website, all of those kinds of issues. So
Mhm.
what I've done with my customers especially in the lounge program is that we figure out, okay, what is your strategy going to be? What is your vehicle going to be? And so let's say someone decides on a blog. Then we work in a 90-day sprint executing that vehicle, once a week or twice a month, whatever they're comfortable with, making sure that that's where the content starts to then be advertised on their social media channels, ultimately driving traffic into their funnels, their value ladder, so that that traffic can convert into a subscriber or a customer. So that's what we work in. And we like to do it in 90-day sprints so that you can evaluate your progress, because you're either going to love it and see growth, or you might see growth but hate it and want to switch to a different vehicle. Giving yourself that time and that flexibility to evaluate your progress and then move forward as needed.
So when you work with marketing with marketers, with business owners, um, how far into the development of their business do you come into that process? Like, could someone come to you at the early stages? Do they have to, like, because I could imagine there'd be a point where people will do a lot of work to do it on their own, because as an entrepreneur, it's like budget is always a challenge, and you kind of almost feel like I have to do everything. Like when I started my
Mhm.
business, I started four different businesses, did four different things, posting on Instagram, social media, consulting work, ad buying, influencer. That's a fifth one.
Mhm.
There's and I was constantly, literally, I was constantly on my computer trying to build websites, and I have no knowledge of how to build websites. That's not my thing. We're an ad buying firm, and I
Mhm.
just remember this moment where I was out with my now wife, my then girlfriend, and my mother in law, and we were all out in Malibu. And I was like, I really can't enjoy the time they're at. I think we went to the beach, and then they went to the mall, and somewhere in Malibu, and I was just sat at a coffee shop. And I was like, I just need to be working on a website because there's something massively wrong with one of the 4 different websites that I was trying to figure out what to do with.
Ugh,
The point being that like it was maxed out. The
yeah.
point being that I think entrepreneurs I feel like we have to a lot of times just maximize our time and our energy to get things done. And what I've learned over the years is that the more you can invite other people to lend their expertise to what you're doing, it may cost you money, but it'll save you a ton of time and strife. So when you come into the process with business owners, in this, that was a whole long way of asking that one question. When do you jump into the process?
I think that's a powerful story because I think a lot of us can relate to that. I mean, I remember spending just as much time at home as I did on a film set and crying every day because I was feeling so frustrated because I felt like I wasn't making the progress I wanted. So I think everyone can relate to that. So for me, I first look at the visibility, which we've been talking about. And then I have partnered with a great friend of mine named Kristen Marquet, who's a publicist. And that's where we help people with their publicity strategy with our brand, The Publicity Place. My goal is, and I've worked with entrepreneurs who are just starting and establishing their business. I've worked with entrepreneurs that are 5 to 10 years in and they're not seeing the results they want. And I think no matter if you're going to hire out or not, your messaging and your visibility strategy and even your publicity strategy has to start with you. You have to guide the ship. We've all been there where we've just kind of handed everything off to a Facebook ads expert or to a marketing person or a social media strategist. And sometimes it can absolutely work. And I'm not saying that it can't, but I think it's much more powerful to know the direction you want to go so you can give them guidance. For example, having all of this set up and then outsourcing to a Facebook ad manager that I took a lot of time searching for, I was able to say, here are the exact brand colors and why, here are the pain points I want to hit on with the messaging, having all of that in your arsenal. And specifically for me with my students inside of the Visibility Lounge program, my goal is let's set up this arsenal of content. Let's set up your social media strategy, but let's also have it that if you need to take a couple weeks off, a month off, you want to take a vacation, there's a family emergency, whatever, or you're in content creation mode, you can step back and things will keep rolling for you. I think that we all need those brain breaks and we all need to be able to see the different ways that we can ultimately outsource, but still have it be in our business plan that we're the captain of the ship. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Sorry, I was muted. The brain breaks are incredibly important, and sometimes they need to be longer than we would like. I'm sure a lot of people over the last year and a half have been through a number of different extremes with their businesses, and living their lives in a very restrained type of way because of the pandemic. Tell us about how the last year and a half has affected Visibility Vixen, your business. I mean, what things came of the last year and a half that maybe wouldn't have come if it was business as usual.
Yeah. So for me, once the pandemic hit, I knew that my biggest challenge was going to be fear. I knew all of my students all over the world were going to feel that. And the first thing you do when you feel fear is you freeze, right? So I knew that chances were, because that was at the time when the Visibility Lounge program was a recurring membership, that they were going to cancel their membership. So instead, what I decided to do is I sent out a survey and I said, will you stay if I cut your price in half? And 95% of them said yes. So that's what I did. I cut all the prices in half, which seems kind of crazy, but it
No,
worked
it
out
sounds
great.
really great. It sounds really great because it shows you care about your customers immediately, and I'm
Yeah.
sure that went a long way in goodwill.
I think that it did because when I decided, okay, and we attracted, I don't know what it was, 50 more members that month or something. When I
Mhm.
decided, okay, I'm moving this into a structured program now, I offered to the members, hey, do you want to upgrade and not have a payment plan anymore? This was, I think, a month and a half ago. And about 50% of them did. So it was a really good trajectory for me. And I started realizing things. I needed a color course. This needed to be a program. I needed a program specifically for publicity with the Publicity Place. So I think that all we can do during these times of change is instead of freezing and giving into that instinct, which the world tells us to do, and to feel fearful, especially in our business, pivot, experiment, see what works and what doesn't. Don't be afraid to create in a time where very few people are creating because they're stuck in fear.
And how do you and what does the world look like for you over the next year coming out of the pandemic? Did the changes you make fundamentally change the course of your business and how you do business?
I think that the biggest thing for me, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, is my value ladder has changed. It
Mhm.
used to be a lot of different offers, and now I've really lasered into okay, opt in. I'm only going to have two. They're both going to be on color. That's going to go into the color course, which will feed into the lounge program, which will feed into the publicity jumpstart program. I'm trying to set it up so that the only traffic I have to worry about are the opt-ins and the rest will feed itself. And I'm sure you probably have a similar structure in place and it's taken me way too long to get it through this brain of mine that that's going to be this successful journey.
And so what's driving your traffic? Is it press and publicity? Is it advertising? What can business owners take away from your journey on how you're building your business?
Yeah, so some of my traffic does come from publicity, and I count that as being anything you're doing on someone else's platform, podcast stages, publications. But actually, the majority of my traffic comes from Pinterest. So
Mm.
that's where I extend most of my marketing efforts. That's where my guaranteed opt ins and customers come from. So, I have hired a Pinterest manager to take this over for me, figured it out myself, and then was like, need to find someone that understands this more, right?
Sure.
And that's what's done it for me. And that's what I found to be the most successful.
That's really cool. So tell us about your TEDx speaking engagement. Tell us about what you talked about on the TEDx stage and how people can find the full video.
Absolutely. My TEDx talk was something you'd never expect, color psychology. That's what booked me the talk. They found it to be really interesting. I spoke at TEDx Tarrytown in New York, and it was their third year. And I don't know if people know this, but every year that a location is able to rehost TEDx, the bigger their allotted audience size is.
Hmm.
So for me, it was a pretty big audience. It was about 300 people. And it was scary. I went all by myself. I was dealing with a back injury, but I literally had prepared like 20 slides and I was up there rehearsing and I said, cut everything except this one thing. And it was all these different colors on the screen. And
Mhm.
that's what I went with. I'm so glad that I did. For anyone out there that's like, well, how did you make sure to stand out? Wore the signature brand color, did all those things. And you can find it on YouTube. Just look up TEDx Visibility Vixen and it should come up. And it was a great experience. And I got to tell you, I booked that before a lot of my other PR opportunities. So anyone out there can book it. It's just finding that unique angle of your expertise.
What are some of the key tenets that people should understand when they're thinking about creating a TEDx speech? I think there's a very specific type of like format. I've never done one. No no aspiration to do one because it seems very difficult. Tell us a little bit about the structure of a TEDx speech because they all have a certain sound and format and how first and I imagine that was your first one, right?
Yes.
So going from someone who's never done it, tell us about how you prepare for that.
I'd never done public speaking of any kind. I
Mm,
had performed on stage at plays, but that was all the experience I had. So it was
mhm,
pretty shocking. And everyone else was a little bit more story based, and mine was more of a lesson. My goal was, because you have to make your concept. Uh, Applicable to anyone in the world. And so I can't say, let's talk about color psychology in business because not everyone runs a business.
mhm,
So my unique angle was the colors in your closet can change your life. And I was specifically highlighting the different colors of the light spectrum, but red and blue, because those are the ones with the most scientific impacts on the body. And so for me, it was really just painting that picture, telling a little bit of story, but trying to make them feel empowered, whether they're going to a meeting with a best friend, whatever it is, that they can strategically look at the colors in their closet. Because most people are attracted to blacks and whites and grays, and putting some
mhm.
color in there can change their intention in whatever environment they're in. So for anyone wondering, like, how do I do this? You don't have to have a specific structure necessarily. You have to have a little bit of story and you need to make sure that your concept is applicable to anyone that's watching.
Mm. So for a business owner who is, you know, I think one of the challenges that business owners have is they know that marketing is important. Then when you dive into marketing, you realize it's a whole slew of different practice areas. Search engine optimization is marketing, PR and press is marketing, advertising. When you talk about advertising, Facebook versus Pinterest versus TikTok versus programmatic, there's a whole slew of different things that are available to marketers. What business owners, entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
what should the average entrepreneur know if they feel like they may or may not need press? They're not sure if they need press, how to get started, and how to make it work for them. Like, what are the top two or three or five like macro things that should be noted for entrepreneurs and how they think about PR and press?
Absolutely. In my mind, there's a big difference between visibility and publicity. The
Mhm.
way I teach it is visibility is what you're doing to attract traffic, subscribers, and revenue on your own platforms. Publicity is what you're doing on other people's platforms to showcase your credibility, to build your authority, and to, show people that you are the go-to expert in the field. So a lot of people establish their brand and then they run to publicity. But the problem is, in a booker's mind, in an editor's mind, they want to see that you have an established presence. So we really have to start with having the established business, having the website, the value ladder set up to go, having your visibility vehicle that's rolling out new content in your social media presence. Before then, you can move into publicity. That's podcast stages, publications. And the goal there is to grow your notoriety, have people understand who you are and why you are the expert. So I think those are the stages that I would think of if I was taking someone through it and just like macro steps. Make sure to have those things in place so they can build upon each other. And publicity, I think a lot of people think I have to be on these huge things or it's not right for my business. Let's say that you're a social media expert, but there are so many different kinds of press that you can adjust to in terms of maybe you just want to stick to podcasting. Maybe you don't want to have a feature in a publication, but you want to write for one because maybe you are an email marketer and you want to showcase your expertise there. You can become a column contributor. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can blend publicity into your strategy so that you can grow your authority and ultimately your revenue.
What kind of expectations should a business owner have for how effect like, we're always talking about return on ad spend. What's my ad investment going to get me? And it's very return driven.
Mhm.
I think PR and press, the same questions to PR and press get very different outcomes, very different answers. Tell us a little bit about how people should set their expectations for PR and press.
Yes. So you have zero guarantees with any publicity. And I know that can feel really scary, especially if you're the personality that, has the charts and wants to see the statistics. The reason why I say that is you could get on, let's say, the podcast Entrepreneur on Fire, which has, a couple million listeners, and you could have, a huge flood of traffic to your website, 100,000 people, let's say. You could go onto the show and have barely anything happen. But what's interesting about publicity, at least in my experience, is that especially if you focus on sharing those opportunities with your audience, I've gotten so many speaking gigs, podcasts, and publication features based on friends or people that are in my connections recommending me for the next thing. So that's what's really interesting about press that's a little bit different than social media or, paid advertising is that there's so much word of mouth that happens. You can work with an editor who features you, who then calls, their friend, whoever at another magazine and recommends you. So that's kind of how it's worked for me. I mean, I went and did a feature at Kajabi, and that led to me getting another feature on another magazine. So you just never really know what it's going to lead to, but you know that it is going to give you exposure and through word of mouth, give you those recommendations to get more and more features.
I did something on. Somehow I got invited to the Kim Commando show for technology,
Cool.
and that got me a quote in Fast Company. I think that's the way it worked. And I think
Awesome.
Fast Company led me directly to a client. I'm not sure if that's the right order, but some combination of that led me to a client. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Um, you know, one of the key things is a smart way to pair up PR, publicity, press, all that stuff with advertising is to make sure you have a remarketing campaign so that people from your website are reminded every so often that they were interested, that they saw more, and bring them back to the funnel. I mean, that's one of the big
Mhm.
things I see business owners missing on that they could easily be doing. It's not particularly expensive because you just don't have a lot of there's not a lot of money you can spend on advertising if your audience is small and you're
Mhm.
doing remarketing, but it's incredibly valuable to drive sales.
It is, and even if on your sales page you're able to list a few logos of where you've been featured, that can have your audience have more trust in you, and I think that that is key. I did work with someone, she's a Pinterest manager, and she actually manages my Pinterest. Her name is Laura Reich, she's fantastic, and she was more of the technical mind, right? I wanna see what's leading to what, and so she, with her features, attached, the links to her website, those specific UTM codes, so
Mhm.
she was able to see how much was coming from where. So you can do that if you want to get into that realm of tracking things down.
So, Michelle, how can people find you and Visibility Vixen?
They can find me by going to the Visibility Vixen website or thepublicityplace.com. And I'm also on social media. Shout me out, screenshot this episode, tag us both in it. We would love to hear what your biggest takeaways were.
Michelle Lewis, the Visibility Vixen URL is visibilityvixen.com. Thanks for being with us today, Michelle.
Thanks so much, Robert. I had a blast.